Welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I am Rabbi Address, the director of Jewish Sacred Aging and the host of these Seekers of Meaning podcasts. Welcome, and again, thank you very much for joining us. In these podcasts, we hope to explore some of the issues related to our own aging, as well as the implications of longevity for our families or our communities. And we welcome your comments to me, Rabbi Address, at jewishsacredaging.com. You can visit the homepage of the website, jewishsacredaging.com, as well as our Jewish Sacred Aging Facebook page. And it is with a great deal of pleasure that we welcome back for an encore visit to Seekers of Meaning, Rabbi Jill Zimmerman, the founder of Path with Heart and the Hineni community, which we talked about a little while ago. But we wanted to ask Rabbi Zimmerman to come on back from Los Angeles a second time. Now that the pandemic we're being told, and hopefully is starting to mitigate out, to really touch base on some of her work in the Neshama area, let's put it that way, and what she's found as a result of all of this year. Now, I really figure a year and a half of in this wilderness, this pandemic wilderness. So first of all, Jill, nice to see you. Thank you for coming back, and I hope you're well. I hope your family's well, and everybody's okay.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And, we're well. And it's so interesting. We both got we're vaccinated, fully vaccinated. So we have this sense of freedom. And then in the last month, we have some really dear family friends from India who got and they were all vaccinated, and they all got COVID after they were vaccinated. So
Here in the States?
No, they live in India.
Okay.
So it's like, yes, it's over. It feels like we're light at the end of the tunnel. And then because we are a world community, it's like, well, no, guess what? It's not over.
No, and I don't think it's ever going to be over. I think it's going to be with that. We just had the podcast that we just recorded with a nurse. She also intimated this is there. This is here. It's here. And I just had this conversation with my own doctor who said, "Oh, this is here for it's now here. We'll develop a vaccine. You'll get a booster shot, and eventually it's going to in the fall you'll get your flu shot and your COVID shot at the same time." And I believe her. I think she was absolutely correct. I think it's absolutely correct.
Well, I think we were going to go to the same place, which was like, yeah, it's learning to live with uncertainty.
Well, that's the name of the game.
What?
It's the name of the game. The uncertainty.
That's right. The unknown, the wilderness. And, you like to think that that's okay. Now we're done and now we can go back. But I just don't think there is a going back. It's not going to go back to the way things were. Yeah.
Never. Well, let me ask you a question, because this came up in a previous conversation that I had on one of the other podcasts. When we were talking a little bit about the not so subtle impact of mental health on so many people, and this idea of trauma. You spend your rabbinate now working in the area of the soul, if I can use that terminology. But what have you found in your work now with people and in the communities that you're dealing with about the impact of trauma? Do people use that word? Because I think we shy away from it. But what's been your reaction? Is this a societal trauma that we're coming out of?
I have used that word, and I would use that word, except that in people who study actual PTSD, trauma from being in a war or being abused as a child in a not so scientific way. But I think that if we understand trauma as being in this state of high alert, that there is danger around that I have to be prepared for. That fight or flight that we all learn about, that when we're in that place, then it does have, and this is actually true, is that it has there is a traumatic response. And it's a whole body, physical and emotional, spiritual, mental response. And I do think that in the last year, one of the things that I've seen is that people are really looking for ways, seeking
Yeah.
ways to kind of navigate in times that feel traumatic. And honestly, it's, at least in the world that I'm in, is not just the pandemic, but the last 4 years, 5 years of the political situation has really been. I also have people who's feeling like this has been traumatic. I say personally for me that, for example, the separation of children from their families. That did not happen to me. Did not happen to me. Okay, but when I saw those images, there was something almost cellular about going back to thinking about it. And again, it wasn't necessarily to me and my family that mothers were separated from children in the Holocaust. So there is a lot about, genetic or trauma in as members of a people, that we've had to relive a lot of that. Um, and so a lot of the last 4 years has been, having our core values. So, not destroyed, but to see their country in a divisive way that does feel like this fight or flight. So there's so many layers. And I would use that word trauma, even though I might get pushback from.
No, no, no. So that leads me to the so let's play with, I want to play with that a little bit, because you work in your communities again on the spiritual aspect of life, and not the political or but the role of the spirit and the soul. Given this last year in your work, is there such a thing as a spiritual trauma?
um, I feel like the spiritual, I don't know if I would use those words, but I'll say that there are spiritual pathways to healing what feels like trauma. So people that feel like, for example, the the wilderness that we've been in the last year of the pandemic, to work with people on, how do I walk through this? How do I walk through spiritually being in a world of I don't know, or being in a world of fear, confronting aging, for example? Was something I hope that we would talk about, that there are spiritual, I don't want to say solutions, but there are spiritual pathways of learning kind of how to come back to again and again, kind of who you are, what your intention is on this planet, who are you supposed to be, and also spiritual tools from the Jewish tradition and other spiritual traditions that help make that way manageable. Does that make sense to you?
But I want you to expand on it a little bit. In the teachings that we do in Jewish
Yeah.
sacred aging, talk about when we talk about Genesis chapter 3 or Genesis 2:18, and we riff basically on the concept of livado. I found in our generation and a lot of the workshops that we do specifically for boomers and the generation surrounding us, I'll throw this idea out to you, that this fear of being livado, the fear of aloneness,
Yes.
exacerbated by the pandemic and isolation. But this root in our gut, we come to some sense of our own understanding of our own mortality, and that triggers this.
Mm.
But mortality means total being alone, in, which is why mankind created immortality. People got,
Right.
well, there's got to be something, so we'll create a belief in an afterlife. But
Right.
I've never gotten a postcard back. I don't know whether you get, saying, this is really nice, and in
Right.
the afterlife, the Phillies actually win a game. So I want to, play
Yeah.
that out with you about this idea of this confrontation of one's aloneness, linked to the understand or the reality of our own mortality.
So I think the pandemic really brought that to the forefront. And it's been really interesting because, I created the spiritual community, Hineni, around, meaning I am present, which is a
Right, right.
spiritual mindfulness community around 7 years ago. But during the pandemic, it has flourished. It's just amazing and become so much more cohesive and supportive. And part of that was because it was a community, it is a community in which people are accepted for who they are, appreciated, asked to participate, connected to each other, and they're in a loving space. It is really a palpable loving space. And so it has been for many who have been feeling alone, feeling separated, a very consistent place to come and feel connected to other people and then to their own selves, to their own spirit. Um, So there's that, but I also want to say to you that while you're speaking, I was thinking that there is a spiritual trauma, which is something that I find a lot in people coming to um, taking my courses or workshops or whatever, is that there are many people that have never found a home in Judaism. They will say, I am Jewish, my parents were Jewish, but they're not the people that they would not feel comfortable walking into a synagogue. They are people that are lost actually, or they, as you wrote in your book, in Seekers of Meaning, that they show up at Buddhist retreat centers or other religious traditions seeking a home. And one of the things about creating this, Path with Heart was that it be a refuge, that it be a place that however you are connected to Judaism, you are welcome here. And that has been healing. I've been told from people who are in the community that feels like it's the first place that they've felt really welcome and connected. And that also is a response to aloneness, that if you feel like you can really be who you are and accepted, then you feel less alone.
Are you
I
seeing
don't
a
know if
change?
I'm totally answering your question.
No, but you triggered another question, which is cool.
Yeah.
Are you in the communities that you're working with? Are you seeing a generational split? Or are you seeing the majority of people who are coming to you seeking older, or is there
I,
millennials
I
and
think
Gen
that
Xers?
most of the people, the vast majority of people, are over 50, like 45 and older. There's
Wow. Okay.
absolutely a population, absolutely. Now, I have some younger people, which is fabulous. I love when they're there. But in terms of making a commitment to participate in their own education and learning and seeking, it tends to be something that is, baby boomer or above. I mean, once people got over that initial how to get on tech thing,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
figured out Zoom, figured out how to do chat. Then people were hungry for connection, hungry for not just learning, but really for connecting in a meaningful way. So I think the pandemic has really, helped people question, who am I? Who do I want to be? And this thing that what do I value? Who do I want to be connected to? This thing that about, I just lost my train of thought totally. It was about, mortality.
Right.
That has been huge. So, like, I just turned 65 in January. And when I
Mazel.
turned 60, think, when I turned 60, that was, challenging for me. However, I always thought, well, I'm not old, okay? Because I'm not 65 yet. 65 was my marker, okay? So, 65 was a whole other thing. However, the pandemic started before I turned 60. And all of a sudden, no matter what mishigas I was doing in my own mind about kind of avoiding confronting aging, the pandemic comes and Dr. Fauci says, over 60, you're in trouble. Okay, you are at risk. And so it was really interesting because it forced me, and I'm assuming other people too, it forced me to really confront what I had been avoiding looking at. Mortality. I was like pushing it off. I was pushing it off. But because I was over 60 and also immunocompromised from a medication I'm on for my mild rheumatoid arthritis, I was doubly at risk. One was by my age. So I think that was true for a lot of people. And there was a clamoring for looking at that I found. What does it mean that we're getting older? How do I spend the rest of my time on this planet? Have I lived up to my vision of who I could be? Am I spending too much time doing with people that I really don't want to be with?
No, I mean, these are the subjects that come up every session that we do in Jewish Sacred Aging. Eventually, wind up coming back to some of these basic, and that's why the texts, by the way, in our tradition are so powerful, because they really speak to these. They speak to these issues. Talk to me a little bit about, because a couple of weeks ago we walked through Shavuot, and the major image of the wilderness, which we all see in Pesach. Why is this metaphor so powerful to us? Is it does it just speak to everybody, because in the end we're all still wandering around looking for something?
Yes. I would say yes.
All right, well, that's good.
Exclamation
Now we can
point.
move on to the next question.
Absolutely.
No.
Well, during the pandemic, I wrote, it was such a, also, I mean, not just a challenging time, but I wrote 5 ebooks during
Right.
the
I want to
pandemic.
we'll get to them now. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to talk to you about the journey ebook.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the last ebook I wrote was about the journey, using the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, the counting of the Omer. And a colleague, Rabbi Cindy Anger, and I, several years ago, had completely re-envisioned the Omer period, not through the Sfirot and any of the traditional ways, but we imagined those 7 weeks as a time of spiritual journey. And we created a model for the 7 steps of what are the 7 stages of any spiritual journey, which is perfect to study and look at through through the Omer. However, it's really perfect for any time. So the theme is journey, and we're all at some different stage of the journey. And then we keep, as a spiral, keep cycling back. But one of those images, there's two stages in what we wrote about that in terms of the stages. One is about the wilderness, entering the wilderness, and then also dealing with the unknown. And those are stages that I think that a lot of us spend a lot of our lives dealing with, right, on any kind of transition. And so the transition into moving into the new world right now, whatever that looks like, or the transition to recognizing aging, all those 7 steps that we talked about really can apply to any kind of journey. And I mean, I just work a lot with these images and metaphors of journey. So one thing that we do in Hineni is that I ask people to like take a piece of paper out and to do a life map of what, and you know, what has the journey been, where have been the wildernesses, have been the places that you really said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going or who I'm going with, etc. And one of the times where I have found friends to accompany on the journey. I mean, to me, everything can be encapsulated in that huge metaphor of the journey, which really is a story of the Jewish people. You know, it's
Right.
not so much about arriving. It's really about the journey. So,
But the ebooks, which are journey, healing, gratefulness, renewal, and return, there, and we posted, I think, on Jewish Sacred Aging when the Omer book came out, we posted the link
yeah.
to that. Oh,
Okay.
where if somebody is listening or watching this and they say, "Well, I think I'd like to explore that," talk to me. How do you get those ebooks? Where do I go?
So if you go to my website, ravjill.com, and there's a tab, a menu that says ebooks, and you can find all of them. And I think that I wrote the ebooks kind of in response to where, kind of taking the temperature of where people are, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think actually they're still all really relevant. So I did the healing book, for example, when at the year marker of the pandemic, I was thinking about what is going on with people and what is needed in this moment. And I always use my social media, always, to kind of like, I'll have a feeling, like a sense, and then I will check it out with my Twitter, you know, following, or Facebook, and just various places I am on social media. And I'll ask people questions like, and when I get these responses, if it's an affirmation, those ebooks came out of that kind of conversation. So it seemed like there was really a need for healing. And I think, you know, in general, however, in that ebook, there's a prayer for when you get the vaccine, or
Right.
there's a prayer for, you know, doctors and medical people, you know, things like that. I collected prayers from some clergy and amazing, wise people, and put them together. So all those books were in response.
The talk to me about the difference between the path with heart and Hineni, because you mentioned both. You're involved with, or you created it. What's the difference between these two? And again, a follow up. If I want to learn more about it, I go to rabbijill.com.
Right, ravjill.com. It's
Rob,
RAV,
Rob RAV.
ravjill.com. Yeah.
V is in V is in Victor. V is in Victor. V is in
V is in
Victor.
Victor, which I call it Rav Jill because when I was in rabbinic school and our younger son was in high school at the time, all of his friends would call me Rav Jill. So
All right.
I love that so much. I loved it. So that's the website. So let me tell you the difference with Path with Heart and Hineni. So Path with Heart is kind of the larger organizational entity in which I teach classes, I do free workshops, scholar in residence, I do spiritual counseling, etc. So there's that. And then Hineni is really the spiritual community that is a membership-based community that people can become involved with. And then they're part of, when you're in Hineni, there's a whole bunch of other benefits that being in a regular spiritual community provides. And so someone might, I would do like I'm speaking to you in both of those hats.
Right. I understand that.
Right. So like when I have a huge,
go ahead.
When I reach out to people on in social media or in being a guest speaker somewhere, I'm speaking from that place of my Path with Heart hat. But when people get engaged in any of the work that I do, there are invitations. I open up Hineni a few times a year because I found that people come in. It's helpful to come into the community with a cohort, a group of people yeah. Does that make sense to you?
But when you say Hineni is a membership community, somebody's going to think, well, what does that mean and how much does it cost? Or is it free member?
No, it's not. It's not free. It's like joining any, it's not a synagogue. Okay.
No.
However, for many people, it functions like a synagogue. So people can pay monthly or yearly, and there's a sliding scale membership, and you can, come and you can also leave if it isn't meeting your needs. And, this sliding scale during the pandemic, I really, I changed the pricing to be 54 to 90 sliding scale per month. Or people it's more reasonable to do it as a year. People can become a member for a year and then that renews. So, but I'm finding that people stay and the Hineni community doubled during the pandemic. So now it really feels like a thriving, flourishing community when people realize that they had to be, could be connected in this way. And there's people from all over the world, which is really cool.
It's the power of what we're all learning. Every single one of us is learning as a result of this pandemic is that the social media, this is here to stay. It will now be a tool in the toolbox of the Jewish community, whether it's for worship or education or communication. It's a tool whose value has been shown to be overwhelmingly effective. And with more and more people, regardless of age, being, as you say, tech savvy, it's going to expand and expand. So
I want to say that if people are interested in learning more about Hineni, or they want to be on the waiting list to find out when it next opens, I believe it's going to next open around after High Holy Days. Because we're moving up to the Bay Area, Northern California. The next course I'm going to teach is spiritual preparation for the High Holy Days, which will be in August. And then High Holy Days I will do online, virtual. And last year I offered that as free and open and asked people if they would be willing to make a donation. So I hope that people would, if you go on my website, you can get on my mailing list and you'll find out about all the things that I'm doing. And you're on the path with our mailing list. So after high holidays, I'll open up Hineni, and you can actually on my website sign up to get information about when I next open up Hineni.
So I want to ask you before we start running out of time an issue because we're coming out of this Shavuot season, and it's part of our conversation at this time of year, but also other times, and that's this idea of revelation, because as liberal Jews, we may not buy into there was this moment of this aha moment at Sinai, but yet how do you deal in your work with Hineni and in the spiritual practices that you do? How do we make this concept of revelation live for our people who, as we both agree, many of whom are searching?
So I'm going to tell you how I speak about it. And I got to this place because I myself was really disconnected. I didn't understand. And for me, revelation, when you hear that in American culture, that seems like a Christian concept because, there is a book of Revelations in the Christian.
Right.
Revelation. Right. Okay. So here's what I've studied a lot about what happened at Sinai. I speak about, and the rabbis do, and you tell me if you agree with this, okay? The rabbis understood that what happened at Sinai was an experience of all the people, all of us, at one time of wisdom, and the rabbis believed that it wasn't just the 10 Commandments, it wasn't just the 613 commandments, but it was all of wisdom going forward. So even the wisdom that's being revealed now, even this, dare I say, this podcast, which is kind of enters into this chain of transmission. And so I speak about it in that way, as that what was given at Sinai was all wisdom, capital W. So Torah, capital T, in the largest sense of that meaning. And that and then also that it was a mystical experience of oneness that we experienced in our own individual ways, this collective, mystical, kind of unexplainable. And so what I do in teaching about it is that I ask people to think about times in their life when the boundaries slipped away and they felt completely connected. It could be the birth of a child. It could be the top of, Grand Canyon, or a group that you're in, and that is a Sinai-like experience. So that's how I speak about it. I mean, what do you think about that?
So if the wisdom of all, in other words, if I'm hearing you correctly, your belief is that at a moment called Sinai, all wisdom had been revealed. And that as we study things and learn more, we're just pulling back the curtain on stuff that was already revealed at a particular period of time. To which some people I know would say, Rabbi Zimmerman, that's very interesting. In other words, everything in history has been already set up and predetermined. Is that correct?
So I think it's revelation in, just like creation, is present tense. It's not a past experience that happened all way back when. It is revelation is continually being revealed. So, the rabbis wrote themselves into by saying that it wasn't just the written Torah that was given,
right,
but the oral Torah that was given, right? And so they wrote themselves in many midrashim were like, hey, we were at Sinai. I mean, it even says in the Torah itself, all the souls were there. So this was a revelation that was collective. not just in the moment, but continually. And so I think of it like I do think of creation, that it is constantly like new wisdom. You learn a teaching from some wonderful rabbi, and this becomes like a light bulb to you. I would explain that that is part of this ongoing revelation, and that I mean, isn't there the midrash that says there's a voice calling out from Sinai at every moment, like it's a radio wave, and then we can. This is the thing about being spiritually accessible, so we can tune into that radio wave, and most of the time we're not tuned in. We tuned
No,
in,
no.
we can kind of get there.
Look, we have instances in the Torah, the burning bush, the Jacob's ladder, where it's when I was ready to receive the message, I received the message. And every rabbi has given this sermon either
Right.
sometime or another, high holidays. It's always there. You just have to be able to, using your image, to get the right frequency. But the message, the message is always coming. So it's
And
the
I think
question of when.
that's right. And that message to me is about oneness. It's about that we are all connected. It's about that each one of us has a unique and special gift to give. That, that there is meaning accessible. That to me is what happened at Sinai. I mean, I don't think I'm making it up. I mean, I'm sourcing it from both the text itself and also different midrashim
No,
legends.
it's basic. It's basic who we are, midrashically and textually, and theologically and philosophically. And there's a sense of that midrash of we were all at Sinai is it does unite. It does
It
put
does.
something
And
in his perspective.
I mean, there's a really, I was just teaching about this, that time, and I don't know if it was the 60s or 70s when that poem that the poet Merle Feld wrote in honor of Rabbi Rachel Adler, who was one of my professors at Hebrew Union College, that we all were at Sinai. It was
Mm-hmm.
an amazing thing in feminist Judaism when women who had felt excluded from revelation, excluded from the whole Jewish enterprise, realized, no, we were all there. We too were there. We may have heard the revelation differently. Okay. Her poem where she goes, you may have written it down to her brother. You may have written it down, but I was carrying a baby. There
Right.
was this validation that women's experience, that when it says kol ha'am, all the people, not kol anashim, not all the men, the kol ha'am, that women said, hey, we were there. We were there. And so therefore, it was a very exciting awareness that has really profoundly affected my understanding of what happened there.
Well, it's not only Sinai, but to me, more importantly, if you go to Nehemiah 8, I think, where you have in the 5th century, the first public reading of the redacted Torah brought back from the exile. In that chapter, it's Ezra the scribe reads the Torah to the men and women together. And I was teaching a class on this recently, and I said, "Here's a verse. Now, what do you notice about this?" And they said, "Well, what's the?" I said, "There's no mechitza here. Okay, everybody's together listening to." And they said, "Oh, that's true." I said, "So here you have was a conversation about the prophets and also another on feminist theology." I said, "Here you have the first public reading of this Torah according to Jewish history, biblical scholarship, and there's no separation. It's not and say, which is again." goes to your point of this unity, or what Dr. Rifkin of blessed memory called the unity principle, who was one of my professors in Cincinnati and the professor who changed my, thinking. But
And
that's another story.
but listen, this is the thing. To me, the major lesson of the pandemic is exactly what we're talking about right now, which is open the doors. Okay. The way that Judaism, in my mind, is going to survive is if we just keep finding ways to open, welcome. It's not so much like, a lingo of, creating a welcoming congregation. It's really the reality that now people can go. The places, if you look at the places that have thrived, like Central Synagogue in New York, where really got themselves together even before the pandemic of streaming. They figured out how to do it, and they do it beautifully. And it's amazing how many people tune in that never tuned in before. And so some synagogues are creating online, virtual memberships. So people will come back.
I've
And
had
so what has to,
two fights about this with leadership in the last week. Literally not fight, but said you got to
I
do
know,
this. Is
it's
the way.
challenging.
It's
We had,
there's no
yes,
more geography in synagogue. There's no geography anymore.
right.
No, not
Right.
at all.
And I think also when I look back at the pandemic, that there were some synagogues or organizations that say, oh, okay, we can't meet in person, so we're going to put everything that we do up online. We're just going to go, that's how we're going to do virtual. But I think that there was another way, which is how do we really rethink what people need? Maybe we don't need to do Friday night, every single Friday night. Maybe we need to have discussion groups. Maybe we need to just really meet people where they are. That's a third way. And that's my hope, that in this new world, we will all be thinking really new.
Rabbi Jill Zimmerman, founder of Paths with Heart and the Hineni community. Thank you very much for coming back and sharing some of your wisdom and experience with us. Good luck in the move up the 101 and over the bridge. And so just drive carefully. But thank you, and continue to stay healthy and continued good luck. And thank you very much. Take care. Take care, Jill.
Thank you for your work. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, my pleasure. We appreciate that. Thank you. To all of you, thank you again for watching and listening, being part of today's edition of Seekers of Meaning. Remember, the show is available on that streaming Roku network. And we again welcome your comments to rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Visit our Facebook page if you'd like to make a donation to continue this work. Go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com. Click on the conveniently located donate button. And a reminder that Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Companies here in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, with a big shout out to our producer, Steve Lubetkin. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address, and I look forward to greeting you again on our next Seekers of Meaning TV show and podcast. In the meantime, take care, stay safe, everybody. Shalom.